This is Gaza. This is Egypt. This is the border between Gaza and Egypt. This is the border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. One more time. Gaza, Egypt, border between Gaza and Egypt. When people talk about Gaza being the largest open-air prison in the world, and Israel or the Israelis or the Zionists holding 2.3 million Palestinians hostage, 50% of them children, in this open-air prison, what they're really talking about is the blockade on Gaza. What is the blockade on Gaza? In practical terms, a blockade on Gaza means that the Gaza Strip is surrounded by a border fence on all sides of their land, and it has no seaport along the Mediterranean Sea. Nothing and no one can enter or leave Gaza unless it goes through Erez crossing into Israel or Rafiah crossing into Egypt. And Gaza has no airport. The Gaza Strip is 41 kilometers or 25 miles long, and in most places less than 5 miles or 8 kilometers wide. It hasn't always been this way. A temporary blockade began in 2005, and the current blockade has been in place since 2007. And who set it into place? Whose policy is this? Israel's and Egypt's. It is a joint Egyptian-Israeli policy in response to Hamas's takeover of the Gaza Strip. How did we get here? In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew 21 settlements from the Gaza Strip. All of these blue areas that you see here were Israeli settlements. 8,000 Israeli civilians were evacuated. Not a single Israeli has lived in Gaza since. A year later, we had the Palestinian national elections in 2006, and Hamas won, democratically elected by a majority of Palestinians voting in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. This led to a kind of civil war between Fatah and Hamas, and it reached its peak in 2007 in the Battle of Gaza, when Hamas took over Gaza and violently expelled all PA or Fatah members. This also involved torture, murder, mutilation. It was a brutal takeover. Following the takeover, Egypt was very worried about Gaza becoming a hotbed of Iranian influence. And the Egyptian government, which was supporting the PA, argued that it was in Egyptian national interest to restrict the border crossing with Gaza and impose the blockade. And who agreed? None other than the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who has publicly and explicitly supported elements of the blockade, including destroying Hamas's tunnels along the Egyptian border. And why would we want to destroy those tunnels? Because Hamas was trafficking arms, weapons. Abbas is on record saying the PA supports the closing of tunnels to prevent the trafficking of arms and the passage of people between Gaza and Egypt. And even said we will continue to support any measure protecting Egypt from danger. Protecting Egypt from danger. And this is no secret. For example, this article from the Middle East Policy Council is talking about the negative, disastrous impact of the blockade and the siege on Gaza perpetuated by Egypt. And in this current war, in this current crisis, Egypt is still clinging to the blockade. Why? It doesn't want to open its borders for fear of a refugee crisis, financial strains, permanent displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, possible militancy, Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters going into the Sinai Desert. Being against a blockade on Gaza on humanitarian grounds is a legitimate position, but it's not exclusively an Israeli policy. Blockade on Gaza is as much an Egyptian policy as it is an Israeli policy. And at any time, not only can Egypt open its border with Gaza, it can provide electricity, water, internet, any essential services through its own sovereign border. If this is really an open-air prison, and Israel wants it that way, and doesn't want it to change, then the solution lies with Egypt.